Hello everybody, welcome to the Daily Sip. My name is Oliver. My mission is to bring you closer to organic Japanese green tea, and today what we're gonna dive into is the most drank tea from Japan. So when we look into Japanese tea culture and what teas are actually the most famous, it is that we are landing in the land of leaf tea, because the original tea, or the kind of the first tea which was really done, was in Japan actually matcha. But in the 18th century, the rolling method of tea leaves was brought in from China, and it was mostly spread throughout Japan in a very fast time, because it was the technique of rolling the tea leaves, and this technique was kind of improving the taste of the tea so much that a lot of the green tea which was consumed in powder form before was changed to leaf tea. And this was then the so-called sencha. So sencha, when you talk about green tea, when you talk about the most drank green tea in Japan, then you talk about sencha. But what is actually the sencha that is the most consumed? So when we are going into the tea regions, and the most kind of the biggest tea regions, the original tea region as well is the region around Kyoto. Uji you might have heard of, just as the starting phase of Japanese green tea. But nowadays actually the biggest region for Japanese green tea is Shizuoka. Shizuoka is situated around 2 hours south from Tokyo, and it is very fertile, and it is also a very hilly region where you can plant amazing green tea without even the need for shading it, for covering it, sometimes for certain teas. So Shizuoka accounts nowadays for around 40% of all the Japanese green tea, or all the green tea which is produced in Japan. Very famous for its fukamushi sencha, but also for normal so-called asamushi, so lightly steamed tea, or the normal steamed tea. So we said now, okay, which is the tea which is the most consumed in Japan? What is the region where the most tea is from? But now what is actually the most consumed sencha in Japan? And there we're landing in the territory of the so-called Yabukita varietal. Yabukita, or the varietal, also called cultivar in tea. So when you have the tea plant itself, which is the Camellia sinensis, and there under this in Japan there exist around 60 different varietals, and the most spread varietal in this case is the Yabukita. And why became Yabukita so famous? So one of the struggles of the farmers and the green tea farmers in general is frost, because during the March, April, or the month of May, when already the small buds and the young buds are growing out of the tea plant, there you can still have nights where the temperature goes quite low, and then if the plant is a little bit sensitive to frost, then you can have, as a farmer, damage in your yield. And what Yabukita actually is, it is a crossbreed of two different, of one wild cultivar, and so two wild cultivars in Shizuoka, and this was crossbreed in 1908. And what actually could be developed is that you have a frost-resistant cultivar, which finally allowed the farmers to have a good yield. And also the tea leaves of the Yabukita are quite big. And on the other hand, the taste of the tea itself was very well accepted by the Japanese tea consumer. So invented in 1908, it really spread out through whole Japan in the 40s and 50s, and is since then in Shizuoka especially the cultivar which is planted the most. It is said that up to 95% of the whole production in the region of Shizuoka is Yabukita. When we look at whole Japan, so there we are around, depending on the sources, 70 to 75%. And the reason why in the south then, and which is now logical, that all the cultivars have a little bit more space to grow. For example, the Yutaka Midori, or we talk about Saimidori, which are typical other cultivars. There the weather is better, it's a milder climate, and that's why the other cultivars can grow, which are also more frost sensitive. But here in Shizuoka we are talking about Yabukita, and here I brought Yabukita from Mr. Masuda, a farmer from Shizuoka, and this tea here is a mountain tea. Mountain tea for Japan is a little bit of a higher elevation for China. Here we talk about 500 meters above sea level, Asamushi, unshaded. So Asamushi lightly steamed tea and unshaded green tea, so no need for shading. Good. When we have a look, so you can see it is not a very dark, but it is slightly dark tea. It is also tea coming from a hilly region, so what we can see is that definitely the tea has not a direct sun exposure all the time, but as it is not shaded, it still touches the sun. But it is grown in a hilly region, and this is also beautiful about Shizuoka, that we can find green teas that are actually also nearly a little bit shaded, or they look shaded because they're planted in a little bit a hilly part of Shizuoka, and there the sun isn't so strong on the leaves, making them rendering them quite sweet and quite nice, with this nice touch of a little bit this typical for me Shizuoka citrusy taste profile, which can be a little bit or kind of a slight astringency for some of the tea consumers. So let's dive into this taste of the Sencha, so-called Sencha Yuri. Sencha Yuri is actually a tea, or this one here has been grown in 2018, so this one here already 2 years old. But as when you're drinking good quality tea, you can also keep them for a longer time. It's absolutely no problem, you just have to store them right. What we're gonna use is 5 grams of tea, and I preheated my water to 70 degrees Celsius. It's around 160 to 165 Fahrenheit. And I add around 120 milliliters of water, leaving in then this tea for around 1 minute. Sencha, you can leave it in just for 1 minute. The tea leaves, they start to unfold, they start to uncurl, and then they give a beautiful taste, and you can brew it over 3 to 4 times. And in terms of tea leaf smell, I'm curious how this tea will smell like. What I know, or when the last time I drank this tea, it was quite of a nice kind of a little of a vegetal note, and you have a little bit of sweet corn, a little bit of savory tones with this tea. But all in all, what Yabukita is known for, and what the Japanese like about Yabukita, is actually that it is a tea which brings quite a broad array of taste profiles. So we have a little bit of the vegetal taste, we have a little bit of the sweet corn savory taste profile, and we also can get a slight kind of hint of astringency, so a little bit more the citrusy taste profiles. And this is what the Japanese like about Yabukita, that it really covers a broad spectrum of tastes, and then they have kind of a fully and completed taste profile. Good, so let's try this one here. So 1 minute to 1.5 minutes maximum. Try to get out all the water. So we have quite a nice vegetal taste, get a little bit of edamame in the taste, in the smell of the tea leaves. I get a little bit of sweet corn. And a little bit of slightly cucumbery taste as well. So it's a little bit of a mix of a sweet and kind of green taste profile. Now, when we look at the color of the tea, so it's not typical this strong green, which we know from, for example, if we have a Fukamushi Sencha or also some of the Gyokuros, which have a little bit more this jade green, but here we are typically in this golden, beautiful golden color, which we get when we do an Asamushi Sencha normally. So it is not a fully kind of a very chlorophyll rich, and it is not a deep green tea. The deeper green and also the longer it is steamed, the deeper kind of the green color you will have. But when you will drink a normal sencha, you get a beautiful kind of golden color like this one here. Good. Let's go into the tasting of the first steeping. So here we have a beautiful kind of a little bit of a vegetal taste. We have a sweet roundness and no astringency at the moment in the end. So what's beautiful about this tea is you really have a nice balance of different tastes. For example, in the beginning, we get this slight hint of a little bit of a vegetal taste. Then it moves over slowly into kind of a sweet corn, a little bit of a savory taste. And there's a slight freshness in the end, but there's no astringency showing up. So I'm curious how the second brewing will be of this one here. There's a little bit an underlying tingling also already of the tea, but it's not too strong. So we are very much on this kind of a little bit vegetal side. Have a little bit this savory, this kind of sweet corn taste profile. And then in the end, you have a kind of a slight tingling, but the astringency not showing a lot. So this is the beauty of this tea, even though it is unshaded. And normally when you have unshaded teas, the catechin part is higher than the theanine part, so you should have a little bit more of the citrusy, you should have a little bit more of the astringency, but this tea here is a beautiful unshaded and still very sweet tea. So now I'm curious what the second brewing will bring. We just leave it in for 20 seconds, it's more than enough, because in the first brewing you really unfold the teas, and then in the second you already have them open and they give directly their taste to the tea. So we see that the tea color intensifies a little bit. Second brewing, often, or some Japanese even say that the second brewing is the best. So there's always a discussion which brewing is the best. Some say it's the first, some it's the second. But here what we definitely see is that the color intensified a little bit of this tea. So we got a little bit more of a slight green hint in, but it's still very, very golden in its color. So let's have a sip. Still very vegetal, then a little bit of this savoriness, and now we get a little bit more of this fresh citrusy note. So the freshness of the tea is definitely higher now in the second brewing. I feel like a little bit more of catechins, a little bit of astringency now. So I have this slight astringent feeling, but it's not disturbing at all because it's kind of giving the tea kind of a fresh note. So it really moves a little bit away from this too strong in the vegetal taste, and not showing too much sweetness, but mixing in a little bit of a citrusy note. There's kind of a nice, kind of refreshing, nearly cucumber note. This is also when I when I do a cold brew with this tea, it's not a too strong tea for a cold brew, but what is coming nicely out is just a slight hint of kind of a cucumbery freshness. And this I get now a little bit. I was a little bit looking for it, and I really get it just when I take the first hint of the taste of the tea, and before it turns into its sweetness, into its kind of sweet corn taste, there's kind of a slight cucumbery, kind of refreshing tone coming out, which is kind of a vegetal refreshment, you might say. It's pretty nice. But we have a little bit the tea moving in a little bit more of more the citrusy, a little bit astringent note. So if you're very sensitive to astringent tones, this tea might maybe be a little bit too astringent. So you saw it's a very, very short steeping I did now. So you can also do it a little bit longer, but you don't really need to because the tea leaves really open. And now let's go to number 3. Color similar to the second one, so we don't have a big change between the second and the third. And now let's see. So in the astringency it doesn't intensify, so it counterbalances out again a little bit. So now I have a nice vegetal taste, a little bit of the sweetness, the sweet corn is still there, but it's not too strong. And in the end, then we have kind of a nice astringency, so a little bit of this fresher citrusy note, also in the third one. So we have first one really going into this more vegetal taste, then a kind of a sweet savory taste and not a lot of astringency, and then moving into a little bit more of a balanced out, a little bit more space for the citrusy astringency. And the third one then moves a little bit back again, bringing down the astringency a little bit, giving more space for a vegetal taste, giving more space a little bit for this a little bit sweet savory notes, and really be balanced out nicely in the third one. But I still have a little bit of this astringency, which is typical. So there's always a slight hint of this citrusy, of this freshness with the tea when you're having an unshaded tea, but it's not disturbing. It rather gives me a nice fresh feeling in my palate. So quite interesting tea to test, to taste. And if you want to dive in the first time into Japanese green tea, I suggest you start with the sencha, find your way through a little bit through senchas. What is actually the things you like? Maybe you like ones which are more sweet, which are more kind of savory. Others, they have a little bit more of a vegetal taste. But this one here has a nice balance in between the two worlds. So Yabukita is definitely a good tea you can start with your tea journey in the world of Japanese green tea. So thanks a lot for watching. I hope you like this one here. And if you do have a question, please leave a comment. I'm happy to answer them. And if you didn't yet, subscribe to our channel and like this video if you liked it. And see you next time. See you and bye bye.